That's fucking delightful.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Roker Report podcast in association with the Sunlun Community Soup Kitchen. It's Gav back after Sunderland's 3-1 victory at the Stadium Light over Norwich City. We're back to winning ways after three head-scratching defeats, I'm going to call them. We got back to winning ways with a nice comfortable one at the Stadium Light against a team who are in limbo, and we took advantage of that, and that's not normally a Sunderland thing to do. So it was nice to get back to winning ways, and joining me as always to chat about it is Chris. Hiya, mate.
Yes, it's nice to talk about a win, isn't it?
It is,
like you said,
yes.
So we had 3 games.
Yeah, well, I texted you kind of before the game and said if we're talking about a fourth successive defeat, I might just shoot myself or something to avoid doing this podcast, but I didn't need to because we're here talking about a win. We for a while there though, I was a little bit worried that it might be another defeat we were talking about, but Sunderland actually turned up, didn't they? And even before conceding a goal, we were pretty good. I think Tony Mowbray, when he was asked about it after the game, about whether he thought we were totally dominant, he wasn't quite as swayed on it as the interviewer. But he did say for large parts of the game we were on top, and that was true. And I think for Sunderland this was an important victory because you know what it's like when you start getting into a rut and you're conceding goals and you're defending poorly or whatever else. The defeats just seem to roll one after the other, and very quickly you can drop down the table. But we've managed to arrest that slide, and I think we all expected it to a degree. I certainly did, because I seen Norwich's form coming into it, and more importantly, I'd watched us play against Leicester very well, and felt like we could have got something from that game. And you know, had it not been for a dodgy penalty call, we might have got something from that game. So I was really, really confident, especially after talking to you after the Leicester game about this one, and I think everything went pretty much according to plan. I think and people wouldn't have seen this, but I think I said privately when we were chatting amongst ourselves about predictions and stuff, I predicted a Danny Bart opener from a corner, but he didn't start. But I did say that they would score and then we would get 3. So I was happy with that, because I think when we did our pod, I agreed with you and said 2-0. So I changed my mind during the week. But I think this was pretty much as I expected it to go. I didn't expect a clean sheet, but I did expect Sunderland over the 90 minutes to dominate. And just really, really happy with the performance, and I think this sets us up now because we've got a nice little run of games coming up, and I think this was a really, really important game we had to win, and these players have got it. They've got the belief, they believe in themselves, and that's the reason that we came out with a 3-pointer, I think.
Listen to you, man. Bloody I changed my mind during the week and got it spot on.
I did. Seriously, I'm going to post the evidence. Now, to be fair, I didn't get it spot on because I said Danny Bart would score, so I did admit that. But yeah, I definitely said 3-1 before the game after I'd spoke to you and had my own thoughts on the game. I didn't copy you.
But to be fair, we called it though. We said that we expected us to turn up like we did at Leicester with the same mindset. Because actually, if you look at those 3 games, you had the Borough game, which was referee related, and you know, I thought we were brilliant first half in that game. Like I said at the time, the Stoke one, that was the big one. That was the bad one. That was the bad game in that. And Leicester, we were brilliant as well. So I mean, you take Stoke out of that run, and actually, it wasn't really a kind of a bad run with bad performances. It was just that. Whatever happened at Stoke, but Mowbray seemed to be on it. I mean, it's interesting how quickly he got them back on it after that Stoke performance, which is good because the Leicester one was a big one. We just wanted a performance there. We got it, and I think it was quite easy for Mowbray to get them up for the Norwich game because it was. We said again, you know, you've set the standard at Leicester. Now we go back to the Stadium Light. We play Norwich out of form. You keep that level, that performance level up there, and you'll wipe the floor with them. And that's what happened. And we said, we actually thought it might be quite comfortable. And that's how it turned out. I thought the lads were absolutely brilliant from the off. I thought, again, with the press, quite interesting early on in the game that I noticed we were talking about kind of patterns and play and things like that, and we'll come on to it. But Roberts and Clarke seemed to be trying to play an early balls in, which was quite interesting. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. And we needed it as well. I mean, because you know, a slip up, 1 goal going behind if Norwich, you know, parked the bus and all this sort of stuff, it could have got frustrated, but we were better than that.
Yeah, and we were better than them. I thought they were very disappointing. I mean, you look at their team.
They were awful.
And we were talking just before we started recording. I mean, I went through the team when it was announced, and you look at it and on paper, that's a pretty solid championship team with a sprinkling of quality in there. Ben Gibson's a decent championship centre-half. He's been around the block now. I think they paid a lot of money for him at one point. Shane Duffy, obviously well past his best, but an experienced Premier League and international centre-half who's played for many years at a decent level, and you would expect to do pretty well in the championship. Gabriel Sara, who in my opinion is one of the best players in the championship. He didn't show it in this game. I don't think we saw anything from him, but that's maybe more indicative of the way Norwich are heading and the manager that they've got and just sort of the way that the team's being managed. But Sara is comfortably one of the best players in the league, was last season. It's a testament to us that we managed to keep him quiet. Kenny McLean, again, another one who's played in the Premier League. Adam Forshaw's been around for years at the likes of Leeds and Middlesbrough. Rowe, the winger, is probably the best player they've got.
Yeah, he was good.
And is gaining a lot of notoriety and attention from higher placed teams as a player who's probably going to get snapped up at some point. And yes, he was probably their best player, but I don't even think he had that great a game. I think that's probably, like I say, more indicative of the way we played, that we kept him fairly quiet in periods. The lad up front, Hwang's a good player. You look on the bench, Jack Stacey, he played for a lot of years for Bournemouth, played in the Premier League. Onel Hernandez is a good player. Marcelino Nunez is a good player. Danny Bart, of course, who never even got on the pitch. So Norwich you look at that squad and you think they should be challenging for the top six, I think. I think that's a squad that should be doing a lot better than it is. But I think we've played them at the right time. I think this was an ideal opportunity to just take advantage because it was a little bit similar to when we faced Stoke, but obviously that went the wrong way around. But you go into the game and you think that the manager could be on the brink here, and it's a really good time to face this side, because if you face them in 2 or 3 months, they're probably not going to be the same team because David Wagner will be out the door. And yeah, I just thought that we handled the game and we handled the situation fantastically. We went out there and we did what we're good at, which was take teams apart. It's interesting that you mentioned the early crosses into the area from Roberts and Clarke. If we've noticed it in analysing the game that we're not doing it enough, then they have. And it's obviously about how well they take instruction on board, isn't it? And from what you gather from what Tony Mowbray has to say about his players, they're like sponges. They're young players. They're willing to listen. They're willing to adapt and improve. But I think, and this is where I want to start the discussion really, the big thing was that Rusen started up front ahead of Burstow. Now, they've trained with him, and the communication won't be there because they can't speak the same language and they haven't played together much. But they'll have watched him in training. They'll have seen the way that he sort of leads the line. He runs between the defenders. He plays off the shoulder of the last man. And they'll have been thinking, right, he's a proper player. Or he's going to give us room to do what we're good at. I think that was possibly the best thing he offered us in the game, because we've had sort of mixed comments on Twitter about Rusen from Sunlun fans. We've had some people saying he was unbelievable. Some people saying he had a really good game and pointing out the qualities that he had. And a couple of other people saying, I'm not really sure why everyone's talking about Rusen, but I think, and this was something that was really apparent being at the game, when you watch his runs and his movement, it's just on another level to what we've seen from other centre-forwards this season. So I think that the likes of Roberts and Clarke, they really seem to enjoy benefiting from the space that he gave them. And that was probably as well as I've seen Roberts play this season. And he hasn't had a great season, to be honest. But that's about as well as I've seen him play. Clarke will get on to, he was totally dominant. But I think the big call from Tony Mowbray was bringing in Rusen and seeing what he can do ultimately, because we've all been calling for something different up there. He brought someone else in, and I honestly think that was a big reason why we won the game.
Yeah, discussed that, didn't we? On the pod, we were wondering what he was going to do. We said that we thought the call to bring Rusen in was probably the simple one, but he might not do it. I had a feeling he was going to stick Job up there and have Pritchard in there. I thought he was going to go with players he kind of really trusted, who he's played before, but no, I think actually that mix of reactions that you're talking about probably sums up his performance, because he was good, he was decent, but he didn't set the world alight. He wasn't anonymous. He didn't go missing. He did some simple things. And the thing is, what we were talking last time about Burstow's contribution, and I think Mowbray was disappointed with Hamia's general contribution, kind of his all-round game, closing down and getting involved in moves. And it was Rusen's first start for the team. He doesn't really speak English yet. He's had a few training sessions. He had to get back to full fitness. And that was his first start. And he just looked busy. and he contributed to the all round play. He got involved in moves. He won the ball right at the beginning. Norwich. It was really odd because Norwich really tried to play out from the back, and it was just bizarre. I have no idea, no idea why they did that. But actually, at that point, Rusen was probably the perfect person to have in that position. At that point, he was busy. He closed them down, and he looks good at doing that. And I think probably that sticks him ahead of Hamir and Burstow at the minute, because he seems the best out of those three to do that. And with the way Mowbray wants to play, I can see Rusen making more of a pitch for that striker role than Burstow or Hamir, purely because he closes the opposition down.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best we're gonna. So that sort of ability to do that pressing from the front, getting involved, dropping in where he needs to, offering support on the wings to the lads when they need it. I think we've talked about this for a few weeks when we've been discussing this sort of general topic of forwards. I think I've said a few times now that long term, I think this team, the way we play, we're going to be playing with somebody like that up front longer term, because a lot of our attacking play comes from out wide, and that means that you need somebody keeping defenders occupied. That's one of the big issues I've had really with Burstow, is that when he hasn't got the ball, he's not busy enough. I mean, Rusen might not score a lot of goals because of this, but the team will be better. The team will be better because we've got someone doing that. And I mean, you ask them players if they enjoyed playing with him. I would say that I would assume they would all say yes, because even when Norwich were camping on the edge of the box a little bit and defending a little bit deeper, because he was busy, it was opening up gaps all over the place. Dan Neil was exploiting it. Job was exploiting it. Occasionally Eckler was exploiting it. The lads out wide were exploiting it. It was just a much more fluid front 4-5 players that we had, just purely because of the system and the attributes of Rusen, really. And like you say, it's sort of early days, doesn't really speak the languages we know. Fitness wise, he was injured when we signed him. He's had to take a little bit of time just to get into the team, but that's promising to me. I think he will get goals, because there'll be games away from home, especially where we're a little bit deeper, and you know how good we are on the counter attack. He'd be out awesome, just sort of belting it forward, linking up with Clarke and Roberts and all the rest of them when we've got space to do it, with that pace he's got in the movement. We didn't sit that. I think the mark of this performance, and someone else said this, and I totally agreed with it, but the mark of this performance was that you actually noticed him on the pitch, where I haven't really noticed Burstow a lot. And I'm not digging into Burstow. It's the only real thing I've got to compare to here is the performances we've seen from Burstow and then Rusen in this game. And Burstow against Sheff Wed was brilliant, but I really noticed Rusen in this game. And I'm just excited to see where it goes from here. It sounds like he's impressed Mowbray. It sounds like he's going to get more games, and that's what you want. You want to see him get a run. I don't want him coming back out the team after a game, putting somebody else in. We need to see the lad giving a go. Let him have 3, 4, 5 games up front to show what he can do. I don't know about you. I just felt a little bit more confident with him up there than I have done with pretty much anyone this season.
Yeah. And the other aspect of the game where you noticed him most, because I think the main one was the fact that he closed them down and he was busy. And whenever they had the ball, like I said, he was all over them. But the other one was stretching the play, which is something we've needed. I mean, that was one of the things Ross Stewart was really good at. He made runs down the line, right down the middle, wherever it was on the pitch, but he ran towards the opposition's goal and he stretched the pitch for us. And you saw there was a few times we played the ball more direct than we've done all season. But what it did, it got us 30, 40 yards up the pitch quickly, and we could start a move from the final third of the pitch rather than the halfway line, and kind of try and move up slowly, where Norwich whoever the opposition is, have already got their defensive kind of set up in place when we're bringing the ball up forward. If we get the ball up forward, which we did quicker, which we did, like I said, when Ross Stewart was in the team, we used to do quite a lot. But Rusen did that. He stretched them. He looked for balls down the line. He looked for balls over the top. He was on the last shoulder. It did look good. It worked. But as was said, Norwich were crap, and he's going to get bigger. He's going to get bigger tests than Norwich City, especially at our place, when a crap Norwich City side tried to play it out from the back. Like I said, at one point, I just couldn't. I was almost laughing watching it. I was going, what? There was no reason for it. Like these players couldn't handle it. They were trying to play it out from the back and giving it away almost every time. And in the end, they gave up Because it was interesting as well how we lined up in midfield. At times we've been talking about, Equa and Dan Neil sitting in front of the back four and then Job or Pritchard or whatever is sitting in front of them. It was a very obvious one player sitting in front of the back four, which was Equa, and Dan Neil and Job really pushed on. We almost had a kind of front five because it seemed like from the instructions Dan Neil had been told, don't worry about what's behind you. We want you getting forward. And we'll come on to it later, but just talking about Rusen, and because I've mentioned Rusen and Dan Neil, the things sometimes you don't see or it's not obvious with strikers, but one of the reasons Dan Neil scored that second goal was because of Rusen's movement. And we haven't had that type of movement for a good few weeks. So when you talk about Rusen scoring, he's one of these players who I think gets around double figures, 10, 15 goals. Yeah. I don't think he gets many more than that. But what he will do, he's going to create opportunities for others just by his movement.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that about sort of effectively gambling by letting Neil and Bellingham join the attack. Because, I mean, over the 90 minutes it worked. We were the better side and we dominated because of it. But when you watch their goal, and we might get into this, if you watch their goal, we're all at sea because there's a non-existent midfield, which is something we've been whinging about since last season. Let's talk about it anyways. So the goal itself, there's a few things I think we need to talk about here. Potential offside, which a lot of people felt there was. The Sunlun players certainly felt there was an offside. We've, with our one camera angle, not the best sort of picture of the pitch, looking back at it, with that, it is tough. But I'll be honest, it's not necessarily the offside call, or at least the fact that he wasn't offside. I don't think he was offside, basically. But it's not necessarily that I've got the issue with. Pierre Equa's looking to the linesman to see whether it's offside. And if you watch the linesman, he brings his both hands into his flag as if he's going to raise it. That's sort of what you do. Bring your hand in, raise your flag. So his hands come in, and then he slows down slightly, and then the guy who ends up setting the goal up, who flies past Equa, who didn't touch the ball, it was someone else who was offside, he runs onto it, and then the linesman's playing catch-up to him. I just think that it was the body language of the linesman which confused Pierre Equa. And I think when a lot of people have said when you're a kid, you're told, play at the whistle. And that is true. You should play at the whistle. But if you put yourself in his situation there, he's waiting for the decision. The linesman looks like he's about to call. He doesn't. And it's just that split second which changes everything. And then they bomb on down that right-hand side. Equa, in my opinion, should clear the ball the second chance he gets. He's right out on the touchline. All he's got to do is go through his man and win the ball. Might get booked for it, but it kills the attack dead, doesn't it? But I think he's still a bit confused as to what's going on. I think Mowbray called it switching off, which is probably more accurate. They get it across, and it's actually a lovely finish from Hwang to put Norwich ahead. But what's your take on that whole situation? Because there's a few things there, isn't there? There's quite a lot to sort of to grasp. And like I say, I was probably more disappointed with the fact that we were just positionally a mess for that goal. We had Huggins miles up the pitch, O'Nien miles up the pitch, Equa totally out of position, Dan Neil and Bellingham nowhere near what was going on. And like I said at the very start of my point here, me and you last season and this season, it's been a big gripe of ours that we just leave so much room through the middle when we're being counter-attacked against. We're very easy to counter-attack against, I think, sometimes. And I think that was a good example of it, is that, yes, you can talk about the offside thing, but positionally, structurally, it wasn't good enough from Sun, and we got caught out.
Right. Where to start here? There's a load to unpick.
There is a load.
Right. So for me, the midfield wasn't necessarily the biggest issue, but okay, it might have been an element of it. But I want to start with Job trying to flick, which he didn't really need to try.
Yes.
Keep the ball, keep possession of the football. All right, it looks great and all this sort of stuff, but I
guess that's the other side of having an 18-year-old making first sort of steps into the game. He's going to make daft mistakes, isn't he? Yeah,
obviously. But I saw an interview with him before the game, and it's brilliant because he loves playing at the Stadium of Light. And actually, I think what he wants to be brilliant at the Stadium of Light, and he wants to kind of just make things happen, which is fantastic. And I love it, and you don't want to take that out of his game. But there's situations on the pitch he's going to learn that you just sometimes just don't do it. When you're committing that many players forward, you've got to be careful because teams are going to catch you on the break. So that's where it all started. And like I said, I don't think necessarily the positioning of the midfield, because if you look, Dan Neil and Job committed themselves. They've pushed forward, which we want them to do. Ekwa, for a defensive midfielder, was actually positioned really well. You've called it where I think the problem was Huggins was committed to. Well, I don't think it was a bad thing that Huggins was actually up the pitch. I think the problem was what Ballard, O'Nien and Hume was doing.
Yeah.
O'Nien was on the right-hand side, almost in the full-back position. So Hume pushed across, and Hume was almost that second centre-half. And what seemingly happened was Ballard stepped out to try and play offside, and he left Trai Hume in behind him. So Trai Hume was the last man. So because it all happened so quickly, the defensive setup wasn't there. I don't think Ballard really knew what was behind him. He tried to play offside. He stepped out. And then we get onto the offside or the not offside. I've slowed it down as much as I possibly can, try to see if it was offside or not, which probably tells a story. And I'm going on the side of that. It was the player was actually onside. And I'm not talking about the second runner, I'm talking about the first one. But even if he was off, I mean, you're talking about millimeters. I mean, it was tight. It was a tight call. And then the ball got played down the line, and you almost heard the crowd all shout, "Oh, offside," which then I think kind of made the linesman a bit twitchy. But honestly, I mean, I think you take that out of the equation. You're talking about Ekwa waiting for a decision. Why should players? You don't wait for a decision. You clear everything out. You just deal with it. I mean, the ball's there to be won. Some players, even if you hear a whistle, still do it just in case. You know what I mean? And the thing is, if we've learned one lesson from the last, 18 months or forever, that you can't trust officials. You can't trust them to blow a whistle. For Ekwa to be even looking at the linesman, because whatever the linesman's doing, it's got nothing to do with Ekwa. He's got his job to do. And I'm talking about Ekwa. Ekwa's got a job to do. He's that defensive midfielder. The ball's there. He's in a position where he can clear it or just commit a foul or do whatever, do something. That's your job. Forget about what the linesman's doing. Like, he might be twitching. He might be kind of, I don't know, he might have fallen over for all you know. It doesn't matter. You crack on with your job. But the other thing that I was thinking, that for me, Ekwa looked really good on the ball, but he still doesn't look fully fit when he was off the ball. And I'm wondering whether things like that were part of him not being fully fit, where he had this kind of sprint for it and he had to do a job. And he looked, like I said, he looked really relaxed when he was on the ball. He looked tidy, as he always does. But off the ball, I'm not quite sure he's there with his fitness yet. But it was a tight call. It wasn't a definite, he's miles offside. It was really tight. I actually think he was onside, if I'm completely honest. But you deal with it. You can't wait for officials to blow the whistle. You just deal with it. And again, we're talking about goals that we concede, and we're talking about things going wrong. It's not like we're done by worldies every week.
No.
And this one was a bad one, and it was really ridiculous as well, because the whole thing was crap, and it was the first time I think Norwich had even getting into our half, like 22 minutes or something. But again, even after that though, it just still seemed like I never felt worried, even when we went behind. I just thought, we'll still win this. It was not failing.
That's exactly how I felt watching it at the game. Yeah, I wasn't fazed at all. I kind of just shrugged my shoulders. I was disappointed we conceded, but I think I'd seen enough in that first 20 odd minutes from us to indicate we weren't just going to collapse. I mean, this team doesn't really, does it? We have the odd occasion where we will collapse, but more often than not, when we concede, you always fancy us to get something back at least. And that's pretty much what happened. I thought, we kicked back off and we were pretty positive. We had, I don't even think we obviously forgot to mention it, but even before that goal, Clarke hit the post, didn't he? The outside of the post with a shot. Those general patterns of play where we were building it down the right hand side, playing it across the box. We were getting it to Clarke a lot quicker, I noticed as well. It wasn't like we were trying to 1-2 our way down the right hand side and then taking too long to move it. The passing and everything seemed just a little bit sharper here. And, there's a touch of good fortune about the goal that we got to equalise, because obviously it hits Shane Duffy on the way in. And it's not the best shot from Hume either, is it? I don't think he would have scored if it hadn't hit Duffy.
Crap. Crap shot.
But what I would say is if you don't shoot, sometimes that's been our problem. In recent weeks, Mowbray was talking after the Leicester game and after the Stoke games about the sort of toothless nature of our play. At times we were having lots of the ball, but not really creating things. And you don't always have to score the perfect goal. Sometimes somebody's just got to pick the ball up around the outside of the box and have a pop. And that's what happens. Sometimes it just deflects in off somebody and doesn't have to be the best shot. Normally it isn't, because when it's flying wide, the defender thinks, all right, I'll stick a leg out here. And I think that's pretty much why we scored, actually, because Duffy's committed to sort of approaching the ball, but he's almost on his knees. I think it's like a weird sort of action. I think that's like it's like when I try to when I get down and sit on the floor with a Ben and I try to stand back up, that sort of, everything creaks in your body. It was that sort of motion, wasn't it, from him? And it goes in, and like I say, it was a pretty ugly goal. I mean, you can tell by the way Hume celebrated it. He wasn't exactly impressed himself. He was just happy that we scored. But I would use this as a big example of the players actually coming away from it. If I was Mowbray, just to say, what it is. Sometimes do what he just did. When you've got the ball around the box and there's a little bit of space opening up in front of you, have a pop. They might not always go in. It might deflect. It might, it might rattle into someone's path. The keeper might palm it into your path. When you need a goal, don't be scared to just do things like that. It might come off, it might not. But I would rather see us do that 3 or 4 times in a game than just play it around the box and not shoot. Timing is everything. 37th minute of the game. Yeah. It meant that, we were going to go into the back end of the half with our tails up and a bit of an advantage. And like I say, all because Hume really would just had the balls to take a shot on, which I think is commendable.
Yeah. I honestly think it's slightly debatable whether he tried to whip across to the back post. It was kind of, because he hit it it was weird though. If it was a shot, it was a strange way to. He is
a right back though, isn't he? That's finishing's not his forte.
But as he said, I mean, I think actually the best that kind of span out of where we started with the discussion about the start of the game with Clarke and Roberts giving it quickly, because we talked about the Leicester and Stoke game where Clarke and Roberts were just hanging onto the ball for too long and they ended up losing the ball essentially and kind of giving away possession. And you could see from the off that they've clearly had a word with Clarke and Roberts to say, like, have an end product to like release the ball at the right time, because Roberts was especially Roberts was doing that, and this actually came from that, because I think in the last couple of weeks Roberts would have tried to cut back and try to take the full back on again, because he kind of beat him, and then I think he had to stretch for it, and then he ended up just passing it to Hume. But I think in the last couple of weeks I don't think he would have played that pass, and so he played it back to Hume, and then. Like I said, Hume, like the way he struck it. Like I said, I think it's debatable whether he tried to whip it to the back post, but whatever, it makes no odds, because like you said, you stick it into a good area and it can hit off anybody off his backside or whatever. And Duffy, people hung out a foot, he hung out his whole body for some reason, and and the keeper was a bit crap as well. But yeah, we deserved it though. That was the thing. It was only 1 team in it, and it would have been criminal if we hadn't gotten back into the game before half time. Again, I think you're right that not only teaches us a bit of a lesson about Hume kind of taking a gamble, but Roberts as well, releasing the ball at the right time and giving someone else an opportunity to create something.
Absolutely. And like I said, the timing of the goal was great, because it was close to half time, but not close enough where we were like thinking, right, okay, let's get in now, ones each. We still had I think it was like 8 minutes of normal time and then whatever was going to get added on. So we played well up until they scored. We played well after they scored. We got a goal, and then we had 10, 12, 13 minutes or whatever with all the add-ons and all the rest of it to crack on and keep going and keep the pace up. And, the way we play, we want to just keep scoring goals, and that's virtually what happened. We just kept going at them, and it was a bit of magic from Jack Clarke, which got us the second goal. That Jack Clarke was missing against Stoke, didn't play so well against Borough. But that version of Jack Clarke, which we saw in this game, that's the one which is getting all the plaudits in the headlines and everyone's talking about him, because when you see him do that, I keep coming back to this thing that you said about just having that one trick that no one can stop, but it's true, because he's gangly, and he's sort of he's got quite long legs, hasn't he, for a winger, but he's got a fantastic touch, and he's really good at using his arms. So combine all those physical attributes with the fact that he's quick and tricky, and he's got finesse and all the rest of it. It makes him really difficult sometimes to defend against, and I don't think they knew what to do with him. He was just sort of skipping around them, wasn't he? And in the end, he got himself into a good position, and he could have had a shot. Actually, he wasn't badly positioned for a shot if he'd wanted it. But Dan Neil had already pointed away, wanted the ball a couple of seconds before Clarke had even finished his run off, and Dan Neil made a proper striker's run. Really, that's the type of thing you want to be showing the young forwards we've got, like Sehemia and Burstow and Mayenda and all the rest of them, and saying, look at that, starting deep, making a run, getting into a good position, relying on his teammates and trusting them. Made a fantastic run, but the finish was lush. It was absolutely gorgeous. That flick, he passes the ball like that sometimes, where he just sort of flicks it over people's feet, and knowing there's 50-50s and the ball drops and someone's charging at him, and he'll just make them look daft by flicking it over them. I've seen him do that loads of times, but I've never seen him do that to a goalkeeper, where he sort of sits them down and just lifts it slightly over them, timing it perfectly. And it was a gorgeous goal, just a lovely goal. Another one to add to the highlight reel for Sunderland under Mowbray, because not many teams can do that. Not many teams have the players with the ability to do that in the Championship either. It's sort of goal you see in the Premier League and in the top divisions across Europe, but not often in the Championship. Yet we've got players who can make it look very easy to do something which is actually very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, this was a brilliant goal. I love this goal. It said a lot about our team, this goal. But the Jack Clarke that you're describing, though, the one that turned out against Norwich, this is the one we've got to kind of keep stum about and hide.
Impossible, because it's not even. Yeah. Notice it's not even Sunlun fans who are doing the talking. Yeah. I go on even now after games. I'm going onto Twitter and all the sort of prominent accounts to cover the EFL. The love Clarke. Whenever he does anything, they're sort of like, look how good Jack Clarke is, and it's hard to keep him under wraps, unfortunately, given what he's up to.
Yeah. Well, let's keep promoting the one that turned out against Stoke and say that's what he's like every week. But you know what? Jack Clarke reminds me a little bit when he's on the ball, because he's so relaxed on the ball, and he's so, like you said, he's a slightly gangly and but he just looks so calm on the ball, and he's eyeing up the defender. He makes, he reminds me a lot of, and I don't think he's in his class yet, although he's got time on his side, but he reminds me of Chris Waddle.
I knew you were going to say that.
Did you?
Yes, I did.
I've never said it before, but yeah.
No, I knew who you were picturing. Either that or Alan Johnson, maybe. I was just thinking of somebody.
Johnson was more tricky, and I think he was just a bit smaller, but his style just reminds me of Chris Waddle a little bit. The way that, like, how relaxed he is on the ball, and how he beats people as well. Is his run to beat 2 or 3. It was typical Jack Clarke. We see it. I was about to say we see it often, but we're supposed to be keeping stum about that. I forgot already. But the other thing, I'm going to disagree with you on the Dan Neil thing when you said that was a typical striker's run, because from the position I think we played him, it was almost like a typical Frank Lampard run. Running from deep, getting into the box. But what Rusen did, because Clarke cut inside, Rusen ran to the near post, so he almost ran towards Clarke, and a couple of defenders went with him, and Dan Neil just occupied that space that was left behind. And Frank Lampard, that's basically what he based his whole career on, making that run that Dan Neil did, and it was fantastic. The timing was perfect, and if you watch the replay back of the goal, I counted 7 Norwich players in the box defending. And only Rusen, who ran to the front post, and Dan Neil, who made the run, just ran completely through them. And the ball was so good that it just split 7 players, took them all out of the game. And Dan Neil, and his run was so well timed. He ran onto the ball, perfect. Just, he had, the ball was perfect, the run was perfect, and he had the perfect amount of time to do what he did and flicker past the keeper. Unbelievable finish. And this is what, we've been talking about. Dan Neil kind of progressing and becoming, the player that we think he can be. And at times, I think we've stunted his progression a little bit, because especially with Corey Evans last season, he was forced to play that deeper role. And he has done a little bit this season as well, especially with Ekwa getting injured. And now you can see that run he can make and that kind of extra side to his game, which we haven't seen too much, and that he's going to add to his game. And again, just like Clarke, he's going to be another one that we're going to have to keep quiet about because we're talking about Clarke and Dan Neil, and we have done for most of this season. They've been head and shoulders above anything that I've seen in this division in terms of individual players. I think they're fantastic. So yeah, we should stop. We should stop talking about them really.
Well, we went into half time 2-1 up, and you were on about how you never felt sort of worried when we went one down. I mean, being 2-1 up, I went into half time and I thought, God, Norwich are shite, aren't they? They're absolutely terrible. They don't even deserve to be in the game, really. And you could tell that they were a bit panicked by the way they'd finished the first half. And when a team's panicked, you sort of think, right, well, they're going to go in at half time and they're going to totally change the way they approach everything. They're going to make loads of subs, which they did. They made changes, and tactically they were a little bit more open. But it didn't matter because we were just totally dominant. I mean, I'm looking at the statistics now. We had 17 shots, 9 shots on target, 63% of the possession. We made 230 odd more passes than they did. We had 89% pass accuracy. They only had 79. We had 7 corners. We took them all short, but we still had 7 corners. We were the better team. We coasted really, and it was something we were talking about. I think it might have been after QPR away or around that time, talking about just how the game management's improved when we get ahead. Like in the past, even thinking back to sort of last season, I think when we played Norwich at home last season, I think we were ahead in that game, and then they made a couple of subs, and I just felt by the quality of player they brought on in that game. I think they brought on Cantwell and Teemu Pukki, who are both good players. I felt when they did that, I think, you sort of expecting them to get back in the game, and they did. Whereas this time around, they didn't have that same sort of. I didn't fear them at all. Not that Norwich are typically a fearsome team, but I always think of them as being a good football inside and a good attacking team, and I just saw nothing from them that worried us at all, which played into our hands totally. Second half, we were just cruise control, had the ball, managed the game well. There were moments where we weren't great, but, I think overall, we had the lion's share of the ball, we had the lion's share of the possession, and they started taking more and more risks as the game went on, which is eventually how we got the third goal. But we were making changes, and it wasn't really affecting the way we played. It was actually, it was like a continuation of what had happened. Sirkin came on for Huggins and gave us that sort of width down the left-hand side. Barr came on and did what he seems to have done quite a lot of recently. Pritchard came on and gave us that assurance. Chris Rigg came on, really impressed with him, by the way. Thought he was fantastic when he came on, and just not be long before he's starting games of football. And then Hamir came on up front and actually made some decent runs and got in good positions. And yeah, he might be a bit upset he didn't score 1 or 2. And I'll get onto it when we talk about the third goal. But he's probably a bit annoyed that he didn't get a better chance to score. But our subs didn't really harm us, where I thought with Norwich, even though they brought on good players, like I went through the team before, Stacey came on, Onel Hernandez came on, Nunez came on, they weren't any better for it, where I thought we were. I thought we just sort of, we never missed a step when we made our changes. And that meant that, when they started to tire, we could take advantage. Maybe we should have took more of an advantage than we did, but I thought second half was just a really sort of good bit of game management from the team and from Mowbray, which was needed, because when we done the pod the other day, we were talking about how Mowbray's game management's actually been off in recent weeks. The Stoke game, the Leicester game, Borough game, second half. There were times in those games where you're thinking, God, what are you doing with your subs? Why is he changing this? Why is he changing that? I think maybe he's had a bit of a wake-up call. It's obviously it's a lot easier when you're 2-1 up at half time. It's a lot easier to work out your sort of your roadmap from there through the second half. But I thought generally as a half of football, it was pretty good, and Mowbray got it right, and the players seemed to know what they were doing, which we said they didn't seem to know what they were doing in recent games. So I was really happy with it.
I can't disagree with any of that. We continued the second half where we left off the first. We dominated the game, dominated the ball. I have to say though, we did. I think you touched on it a little bit. We did have a couple of brain farts. I mean, there was one around the hour mark where they got in down our right and they ended up hitting the post with a header.
Yeah.
Uh,
It was the outside of the post when I think it was.
yeah,
sort
but
of,
we just fell asleep down our right. They got in behind and got a ball in the box. Actually, I wanted to mention though, it was around that time Roberts got an elbow right in the face, like right on the touchline. On about it was about on the hour mark. It was right in front of the linesman, and I mean it's a red card all day. But and the other thing, there was about 5 minute period after we made the first batch of subs where we're talking about game management. Norwich at one point, I mean, they had a couple of, I mean, they were all half chances. They didn't really have any clear cut chances, but there was one. Patterson had to make a decent save, and there was one half chance that came because, like, we're 2-1 up at home, and Ballard stormed forward.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah,
Left us with two at the back, and I'm like, I talking about game management. The last person you expect that from is Ballard at the back, like charging. He ended up kind of joining the attack. He was kind of, for some reason, he just disappeared. They almost caught us on the break, but they didn't deserve it. Like I said, we were in complete control, and it was just these little things that at 2-1, I mean, at 3-1, you go, oh well, that's fine. You know, get another one or whatever. You've got that kind of security. But at 2-1 with about 15 minutes to go, just kind of keep a level head and just get the 3 points. Just you don't need to do that at 2-1. But yeah, like you said, we dominated the game, kept the ball well, but we looked dangerous though, which is good because we've talked about having lots of the ball in recent weeks and not looking like we're going to create anything with it. We did in this game. I thought most times when we went forward, we looked like we were finding space, and it'll be interesting to see how much was that playing Norwich who were crap, or was that us being good? And we'll see that in kind of weeks to come. Hopefully, the Leicester game was possibly a bigger sign of how well we're playing rather than this Norwich game in a weird way. But yeah, and then you talked about the subs. Hamir got on for more than 2 minutes, which was good. He got kind of 20, 25 minutes. And we'll mention Hamir, guess what can come on at the penalty now, I suppose.
Yeah, well, in real time watching that, I'm looking at Hamir's run and I'm thinking, you've got to pass it to him here. You've got to. And I actually think if Clarke hadn't won the penalty, we'd be slating him right now for not passing that ball. Because there's really no need for him to cut back out to the outside. I mean, it happens because they're so clumsy at the back. It's not because Clarke was clever or anything. I mean, I'll go right back to the start of it. You mentioned earlier about Norwich playing out from the back and not looking comfortable. Well, that's where the goal came from. I think it was Shane Duffy had the ball in possession, and he takes a fairly heavy touch, which takes the ball way away from him, and Clarke's already pressing him and capitalises and captures the ball back from him. Hamir's positioning is brilliant. If you just watch him, right? Watch, even when we don't have the ball, when the ball's going to Duffy, Hamir's gambling. He's actually he's already thinking, if we win the ball here, I need to be in a good position. So Hamir's actually pushed quite high, and he's sort of in between the Duffy and the other defender, which is a good sign. I think that's a really good sign, even though he's not scored yet. He's not full of confidence and not really getting many minutes. He's doing the right things off the ball, which is good. And yeah, Clarke closes him down, wins the ball, which is all fantastic. And then Hamir makes another really good run. He goes forward, then drops back 5 yards, which gives him the space. If Clarke wants to knock it along, Hamir's got a clear shot on goal and nobody round him. And Clarke, I think in that situation was maybe a little bit selfish, but it's hard to criticise him because he does do the defender. I think it's McLean again. I think it's McLean who gives the penalty away. He does do him. It's like tired legs, hanging a leg. Clarke's too quick for him. He brings him down. No complaints about the penalty. Not one Norwich player contests it. But it seems daft because Clarke won the penalty. He scored the penalty. It was a well-taken penalty. But after I'm going, I wish he'd passed it to him. Yeah, I'm dying for one of these strikers to get a goal. And Hamir didn't look impressed. If you watch him even when we've won the penalty, he's punching the ground and sort of screaming. Well, to be honest, I'm glad that he reacted like that because he's a striker. He's trying to make an impression, and he should be frustrated that the players on the pitch there to supply him with chances. One of them had the chance to and didn't. I would be frustrated, and you want to see that sort of that attitude from centre forwards because the centre forwards have to be selfish to be goal scorers. But well taken penalty from Clarke. There was no doubting that it was a penalty. I'm just a little bit disappointed for Hamir in that situation because I think he worked hard off the ball to even sort of create the space as well, for Clarke to run into. Just It sounds daft to even be sort of picking at it because we scored and it killed the game dead. But I think we're all desperate for one of these strikers to get up and running, and that was as good a chance as Himia will get at any point to get in a good position to score.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like I was going to mention his movement as well. I thought his movement was great. He got into a really good position. But I just mentioned like how Clarke made this for himself, because this is something we don't often mention. But Clarke, it's one of the things Clarke is really good at. When the defenders are in possession of the ball, he waits for just the right moment and sticks a leg out and gets a touch onto it. And the amount of times he nicks the ball off a defender's toe is ridiculous. He's really good at timing it. I mean, I remember, was it he did it at Fulham in the cup last year? That was a big one. But you could probably rattle like 5 or 6 off in the last kind of 6 months.
Even this season,
like
there's been quite a lot this season, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he might have done it against Southampton, but the way he does it, like I said, he times it to perfection, where he sticks a leg out. He knows exactly when a defender's going to take a little touch, and and someone like Duffy, cart horse, he kind of took ages to kind of stick a leg out. Clarke, it was pretty easy for Clarke to nick it off him, but yeah, I mean, and I think that might have been part of it, that because Clarke made it for himself, I think he was kind of thinking, right, well, I'm going to finish this off because I've done this, I've created this chance. But yeah, Himia got into a great position, and and it is interesting because we're talking about Premier League teams looking at this, and if the scouts were there and all this sort of stuff, it's one of the things that they'll be talking about, that if they brought him in, they would probably work on, because you go at the very top, you look at the Man Cities and the Arsenals of the world, you go back to Wenger's Arsenal and all this sort of stuff, that actually players got in that position, and 9 times out of 10 the top players lay it off. They don't do the difficult thing, they do the easy thing.
Well, even that Manchester derby, if you look at Haaland's on a hat-trick, in a position to score, and he puts it across goal to Foden to just tap it in. That's what the top players do. Even though they are selfish footballers, it was a better option to pass it, and he did. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, he won the penalty, and like I said, you can't. I'm not going to try and not to whinge about winning the penalty and getting the third goal at home, because and the other thing as well. I mean, I saw an interview with Clarke after the game, and I hadn't realised actually that it wasn't a conscious thing that he'd kind of taken on the mantle of being the penalty taker. It sounded like I hadn't realised that, what the story was behind it, how suddenly he just kind of fell into it and he was suddenly the new penalty taker. But he's got it. Like, you're really confident when he steps up. I mean, penalties with Sunderland have been a strange thing. We seem to go through phases. Sometimes we fall on a really good penalty taker who you're confident of, and then we go through periods where we can't score one.
Do you remember back in the Premier League where I think we might have had the record for like consecutive scored penalties or something like that? It was weird.
Yeah.
I think Seb Larson used to take them then, but we went on
we
a
had
really
Bent.
big. Yeah, we had a
Well.
really big run where we hadn't missed a penalty for years, and then I can't remember who brought that one. Someone will get back to us on Twitter and tell us who that was. But yeah,
Yeah, and I remember missing 2 in one game, Terry Butcher's first game, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so we've had been mixed over the years with penalty. But Jack Clarke at the minute with penalties, you just, when he steps up,
they're getting better. I think the first couple he took this season were a bit scuffed, but the last couple have been good.
So yeah, he's got a cracking penalty on himself. It was a strange one, because I think even though everyone was celebrating the penalty, you thought, we could have just been 3-1 up and Himia got his first goal. But having said that, Himia did something similar in injury time when there was Chris Rigg running behind him, and instead of kind of letting it roll through to Rigg, who was kind of facing goal, he tried to hook it and skied it about 20 yards over the bar. So if Himia's kind of dishing it out, then he's got to be able to take it off, because I don't think Chris Rigg was too happy.
No, he didn't look impressed, did he? But
No.
yeah, we managed to get the win, and thoroughly deserved it. I mean, before we get some final thoughts on the performance, I'll do the 3-word reviews, which we've got from the Rotor Report Twitter page. We'll start off with Jeff Ram, who says Equa's left peg. Chris Jones says Rusen up top. Eric Platten says back on track. Hazy says worst linesman ever. Phil Smith says what we needed. John Wilson says Lino was appalling. David Keeler says Neil gorgeous finish. The Beast says back with confidence. Steve A says on the up. Sam Blakey says Jack Raymond Clarke. And he said Jam there. Claire Atkinson says no crisis here. Joshua says Rusen the man. GM407 says back on track again. Lots of those ones. Donaldson Charlie says defensive worries persist. Oh, I like this one. SR7. I think this is in reference to Dan Neil. Jaredonna. Bossed it. I mean, he's from Hebron, but we'll give you it. Jaredonna. SAFC Pizza is vital 3 points. Kevin Lewis says strikers. What's strikers? Tony Burns says stuff the Canaries. Yarmnat says Clarke, Kane, Jude. I think he's England quality. Paul Cook says on the road again. That's 4, Paul. You're the first person to do that in a while. And we thought we'd clamp right down.
3-word police.
Yeah. Then 2 contrasting ones to end off on. Andy Coyle says Rusen looks good. And then Kitch says Rusen isn't fast. Isn't fast? I don't know what game you were watching there. Like I thought you looked pretty pacey to me, but there we go.
He's not lightning, but he's not slow at the same time.
He looks pretty quick to me. But yeah, just some final thoughts on the result. And Chris, I mean, we've got a week till we play Swansea. We're not going to go into that because we'll do a preview on it. But like I said at the top of all this, it does set us up nicely, doesn't it, for what lies ahead? I mean, you look at the fixtures, and after this, we've got Swansea, Birmingham, Plymouth, Huddersfield, Millwall, West Brom. That's not a bad run of games, that. So getting that win was important, and doing it in a bit of style too, obviously very important as well.
Yes. Well, just looking at the next game, Swansea was one of the few games last season where you can actually point to and say we weren't on it.
Yeah, we were shit.
we were awful in the first half at Swansea last season. So hopefully we can go there and do a bit better down there. But it was interesting to listen to Mowbray after the game. I think a big thing, and he said it straight away, the next 3 games, we've got no midweek game. So the next 3 games is Saturday, Saturday, Saturday. He's got plenty of time on the training pitch, which I think he wants, and I think he was desperate for. I think when we've got these new players and, you know, the communication, and he's, you know, we're trying to do different things, and he's trying to do tweaks. You can just tell by the way he was that it's obviously not easy to do it when you've got midweek games, and it's more about kind of fitness and keeping the players sharp than it is trying to work on tactics and work on the training pitch. So I think that's a big thing in the next few weeks. And I know it sounds daft, but traveling down to Plymouth without a midweek game ahead of it, we've got like a week to prepare for that, because that long trip down there. So I think that suits us. And again, you've got the sandwich in between those 2 away games of Swansea and Plymouth. You've got the Rooney effect, but it's an early kickoff as well. I never liked.
Thing is, say the Rooney effect. And I think those were the words that Mowbray used as well when he was talking about what was coming up.
Yeah.
But Birmingham have started horribly under him. I'd rather be playing them than Swansea next week, because they've lost their first 3 games. The fans aren't having them because they didn't want rid of the last manager. So again, just as I said before about this match being the right time to play them, fingers crossed by the time we do play Birmingham, it's the right time to play them too. Yeah,
it could be, but I think what Mowbray, rather than how Birmingham are doing, I think Mowbray was more pointing to the fact it's just going to be a circus, just because it's Rooney. There'll be more focus on it. There's more kind of a bigger spotlight on it. So it's kind of more getting our players into that frame of mind. Just that, you take that out the equation, and it's just like we're playing Birmingham City, and like keep all that fluff out of their mind to keep them focused. So I think it was more from that point of view. But you're right. I mean, the thing is as well that the championship table, I mentioned it in the preview for the game. I mean, I think before the game, there was something like 8 points separating third down to 21st before the game. And I think it's stretched out a little bit, but it's just ridiculous. And every win has such a massive impact. I mean, we could be looking at the fact that we are, we could be now sitting 11th, 12th, something like that, rather than sitting 7th and thinking, yeah, we're in the mix. And it's just, you can drop so much, and that has such an impact mentally, whether you go, right, we've dropped down to mid-table and you've worked so hard and played so well, and then you find yourself mid-table just because the table's so tight. So every win, every point you pick up in the championship, it seems to have a massive impact on your league position. But yeah, I think the main thing was to get 3 points on the board, and the last 2 performances, for me, that's the most important thing, that we're getting better and we're improving, because we've said that even when we were kind of sitting 3rd, 4th in the table, we both said that there was more to come and we were still in second gear. And I think the last two performances have showed, and it showed the players as well. Jack Clarke said it after the game. He said they knew that the Stoke game wasn't good enough. They've been happy with the last two. And if we can keep getting better, and we're sitting 7th, that's got to be a good sign. And yeah, November on paper seems like a good month. Hopefully we can, but we've said it before, but hopefully we can top up. I mean, 4 games where you'd think would get a decent amount of points in.
Yeah. Well, let's come back together at some point during the week and talk about Swansea. Yeah? We've got a couple of days off. It's nice not having midweeks. Like, it makes all this stuff difficult, doesn't it? It means we're trying to cram things into podcasts and all the rest of it. But at least we're doing it on the back of a win, which is of course lovely. So yeah, there we go. We're going to Swansea next weekend, and another difficult game. They're only 4 points behind us. They're all hard games, as Mowbray likes to point out all the time. But we'll be back with a preview for that. Quick plug for the book again. If you haven't already picked up a copy, make sure you do. SAFC 365, which is Rote Report's first ever book, is for sale. £10, 400 pages of absolute quality. You can catch that at the top of pretty much all of our articles. We've got them pinned in our social media posts. It's also, of course, hosted on the Your Love Supreme website, so head across to their website and you can get that there. £10, like I say, all profit goes to Sunlun Community Soup Kitchen as part of our fundraiser this year for them, which we do at the end of each year. It all goes to a good place, so make sure you pick up a copy of that. And we'll be back with a pod ahead of Swansea, so make sure you catch us for that one. Cheers, Chris. Thanks as always, mate.
No bother. Always nice after a win.
Yes, and cheers to the listeners. We will see you all in a few days.